glue. It's a great word of the doesn't say glue. It's a great word of the
I don't know, but I've been told.
I don't know, but I've been told.
Clean energy is better than gold.
Clean energy is better than gold.
How long will they wait? How much will we pay? We need climate action yesterday. Better than living in climate hell.
Better than living in climate hell.
Hey, hey, ho, ho! Fossil fuels have got to go!
We'll fight climate change. We'll show them how. Tell government we need net zero now. There is no planet B. When smoke from fires on the west coast are able to obscure the skies in the east, we know we're in trouble. And many of us realize that climate change is already picking up speed, and there is little chance of stopping that momentum with the lack of action worldwide. We need climate action yesterday. At its core, our economic system is built on the psychopathic notion of infinite exponential growth in a finite system. And every government is locked into the growth economy and prioritizes it, even as it's killing the planet. Growth at any cost is no longer acceptable, and governments need to stop kicking the climate change can down the road by merely strengthening regulations of future emissions and must enforce limits to emissions now. We have a city government who refuses to enforce its idling laws despite the practice being rampant. We have a provincial government whose ruling party does not prioritize climate change, in fact makes changes to worsen emissions, and likely do not even believe climate change is real. And we have a federal government who talk a good game on climate change, but then bought a pipeline for the oil sands, hands down the highest emission source of oil on the planet. Luckily, Beaches East York is a very progressive neighborhood, and we elect very progressive politicians. Our city councillor, Bradford, saw an opportunity in the COVID crisis and fast-tracked more carbon-free transportation with the Danforth bike lanes. Thank you, Brad. Our MPP, Rima Berns-McGown, relentlessly criticizes the partisan ideology of the Ford government while standing up for our rights. And our MP, Nathaniel Erskine-Smith, has proved time and again he's willing to vote against his party for something more progressive. We need to keep up the pressure, not just with our governments, but with our fellow residents. It should not be socially acceptable to sit there idling a vehicle needlessly for 10 minutes while staring at a smartphone figuring out where to go. It should not be acceptable to improperly dispose of waste. And it should not be acceptable to tear down perfectly usable homes in order to build something newer. We need to make every emission count. Excess carbon emissions don't stop at the border. You can't save them in a bag or store them in your basement. A person's emissions is their neighbor's air. Whether you are a climate change activist or climate change denier, we're all in this together. We can't just hold our governments to account. We need to hold each other to account. We need to call out wasteful and destructive practices wherever we see them and not be afraid to shame people unwilling to change those practices. It's time to challenge climate change denial head on and let the world know that when it comes to climate change, we will not accept anything less than net zero, and we demand it now.
Bruce Nagy was unable to speak, but sent an audio clip. Bruce Nagy is the author of The Clean Energy Age and a professional journalist, a speaker for Al Gore's Climate Reality Project, and has traveled all over North America interviewing experts in climate science, government planning, engineering, architecture, clean transportation, renewables, and storage. Bruce has lived with his family in the beach area for more than 40 years and contributes environment stories to the Beach Metro News. Learn more about Bruce and his work at bfnagy.com or brucenagycom.wordpress.com.
When I was a child, I watched on our little TV while my older sister and her friends marched in Ottawa. They demanded actions on civil rights, gender rights, environment protections, They stood on outdoor stages like this and they screamed out, when we finally get the power, we will change this world. But that's not really what happened. After that, they had babies, they had careers, they had families, and they began to say, well, I believe in being green, but I don't have time right now. I don't have the money. I don't know how a solar panel or a wind turbine or an electric car or a heat pump works, and I don't have time to do the homework. I don't have time to research who I should be voting for. I guess some of that could be considered semi-legitimate for the first few years, but 4 or 5 decades on, it's just now really just lame excuses. And we have less time now, and we're all out of lame excuses. Let's stop saying, well, it's different for me, my family is unusual, my business is special. When Greta Thunberg was invited to the UN meetings in New York, that was pretty special business. But she could have said, you know, my schedule is different, I'm getting on an airplane. But she didn't do that. Because Greta doesn't believe in lame excuses. She knows that time has passed for excuses and half measures. It's a crisis. It's an emergency. Our house is on fire. After working almost every day for 15 years on climate solutions with engineers and energy planners and government programmers, I've learned 4 things. I'm going to pass along those 4 things to you, and then I'm going to get off. Number 1, there are no more excuses left. There are no excuses as a society or individually. There are no technical reasons that we can't have completely green energy and zero carbon. There are no economic reasons. We have way more solutions than we need. We have enough proven, affordable, job creation, economy supporting solutions to solve this crisis. And you can take that from me, because that's my field. That's what I do all the time. That's why Greta says it's already solved. The only thing we don't have enough of is political will and determination. Number 2, we know for sure now that corporations and consumers will not change until and unless our governments require them to do so. Self-regulation, that's a myth. Getting the oil and gas and nuclear industries to help design solutions, it's a complete non-starter. It's a waste of time. We've tried it. We've proven it doesn't work. By the way, I have a message for Doug Ford. Nuclear and small nuclear, they are not the answer. Nuclear is not safe. It's not inexpensive. It's not healthy. It's not clean energy. Small nuclear reactors are 15 to 25 years from proof of concept. That's not even commercialization or building one. So they're a non-starter. They're a PR exercise for the nuclear industry. That's why the rest of the world is closing its nuclear plants. The global leader, nuclear leader, France, is closing all its plants. The state of Illinois, which uses more nuclear than everyone, they're closing all their plants. Nuclear is for people who have not done their homework. Number 3, there has been some progress. We have struggled, we fought, and we're replacing coal, gas, nuclear with renewables and batteries. We've begun to electrify our vehicles and buildings. We're doing the homework. We're getting rid of our SUV gas guzzlers, and we're replacing our gas furnaces with good windows and heat pumps. However, number 4, there are still way too many people, and unfortunately they are often our leaders, who say, let's go slow, let's study this some more, let's be prudent, let's be Ontarians, let's do half measures, let's let the industry design it. Now these delayers and incrementalists, they are more dangerous than the people who do nothing at all, because when they don't know what to do and implement a kind of a half measure, people think, well, it's all under control. But it's not. It's not under control. We're backsliding all the time. We need a lot more forward momentum. We need full government commitment and ambitious, detailed plans. We need action now. No more half measures, no more lame excuses. And if our governments will not recognize this as a crisis if they refuse to do their homework, and if they will not announce ambitious, detailed plans, implement those plans, we need to continue to exercise our democratic rights. Not only to strike and to march and demand change, but more importantly, to vote the deniers and delayers out of office. As you know, this literally is a matter of life and death. Our lives, our children's lives, are the other species on the planet. So please switch to electric vehicles, get rid of your gas furnace, and vote for the right people. You have the power, everyone. Please use it, and please change this world. Thank you.
Now, I was reflecting on where we were last year at this moment, and a global conversation was finally starting to emerge. You were seeing big corporate businesses respond to pressure, changing their practices, and we were finally having this conversation, not just in academia, not just in a classroom, but around our kitchen tables, with our neighbors, with our friends, and our families. We were talking about the need to take action on climate change, and we were talking about the need to accelerate that action now. We were having conversations about how our daily practices, the decisions that you and I make in our daily routines, and how we can make a difference in that respect. And that was a really, really pivotal change. And we saw folks like Greta changing the world, standing up, calling out bad actors, and calling all of us to question our personal practices. It was a moment that transformed the way we think about the world going forward. Obviously, a lot of things have changed over the past year. We are dealing with a global human rights movement. We are dealing with a global recession, and we are dealing with a global pandemic. But alongside of that, we can't lose sight of the need to continue to pursue an environmental agenda and an agenda that prioritizes a net zero future, an agenda that prioritizes the earth, and an agenda that addresses the climate change challenges that are facing all of us. There are things that we can do in our day-to-day lives. There are decisions that you and I make as neighbors, as Torontonians, as Canadians, as consumers. And, Adam makes a really good point when he talks about the whole model predicated on infinite growth. And if you actually stop and think about it, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We live in a world of finite resources, and the premise of infinite growth is one that's complicated to get your head around. But I think that the decisions that we can make, local government, provincial government, national government, those can make an impact in the way that we live our lives. The things that we've seen as a COVID response have not just been about the pandemic, it has been an acceleration of the way we move in our neighborhoods. The Danforth bike lanes, the hyper-local trips we're taking right now, the assumption that you are going to live in this community and commute downtown or commute to other parts of the city, we don't have to accept that anymore. For years we've talked about the need for telecommuting, for work from home, and yet many organizations have been very reticent to do that. Now is the opportunity we have seen in this catalytic moment that we could do it differently. And we can't hold back on that. We need to embrace the future. We need to ask our elected officials, our leaders, our community organizers to do more. And we need to do it together. So I am very proud of the work in our community in Beaches East York, you as neighbors, because I know that you've been getting out there, you talk to your neighbors, you talk to your friends, you hold us as elected officials to account, you ask us to do more, and that's important. And you engage in those conversations where people can learn. And, Dora was here, I don't know where she is now, but Dora was here earlier, and, right there. A great example of someone who spends her weekends doing public advocacy work down on the beach, using artwork to show just what kind of an impact us as humans can have on our environment. She's down there on the boardwalk a couple times a month, big art exhibits, picking up plastic straws and bottles and, all that sort of garbage that ends up on our beach. And we often take for granted that stuff is just going to be handled. But I think there's an accountability piece for all of us to be involved in cleaning up our neighborhood and making our beach and our environment even better. So big round of applause for Dora for that ongoing effort. I talk about that downtown all the time. Nobody else does that. It's amazing. So the story and the message there is you can make a difference at a local level. You can be that positive change that you want to see, whether that's riding a bike to a local shop, taking transit, picking up garbage, having conversations about the ways that we can reduce our environmental footprint, looking for opportunities to retrofit your homes, working with government partners to access grants and funding supports to do that. There's so many things that we can do, but we learn from each other. We very much are in this together, and the only way forward is if we come together as a community to make change on this. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your support, and thanks for all the help.
Yesterday I attended the youth-led Global Day of Action downtown, and yes, applause for them, because really that's why we're all here today, for keeping the movement going throughout the pandemic and working to organize us. I took the opportunity, much like I think many of us have, to reflect on where we are now and where I was last year. And funny enough, last year this time I was out campaigning and talking to folks, attending youth climate marches, and it hit me that throughout the year there has not been much change. I was still at a youth-led climate march. I was still looking for comprehensive, serious action from our federal government on the climate. I looked at where we are today, and I realized that the speech from the throne just reiterated a lot of the campaign promises that I heard last year. There's shame actually, because there's still no path forward to how we reach net zero emissions. There's no path forward for how we're actually going to retrofit our homes. These are top priorities. Canadians, I understand, we can care about multiple things. We are in the middle of a pandemic. And youth are still out here organizing in our streets in the context of this pandemic with an uncertain future for their education. We are still uncertain of if we're going to get any action at the federal level. I want to leave you with this. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us to address the single biggest issue pressing us as a species. It's pressing us in our health. It's a global safety issue. Look at what we have managed to do with our governments and for each other when we address and acknowledge a global health crisis immediately. We can do this. So we need to take this as an opportunity to not just grow back, to build back better, stronger. We need to build back greener, for sure. We need to grow back more just. And we also need to grow back more caring. Because again, remember what we all just went through in the pandemic. We took care of each other. And our government went through extraordinary measures in order to address the health crisis. This is a health crisis. We need action now. Thank you.
We are at a crossroads. We are living through a number of crises: the COVID-19 health pandemic, natural disasters including unprecedented hurricanes and wildfires, a reckoning for racial justice, and of course the climate crisis. We must recognize that these crises are inextricably linked and should not be treated in isolation. Yesterday, a coalition of youth climate groups across Canada organized actions across the country from Halifax to Vancouver for the Global Day of Climate Action, in response to Prime Minister Trudeau's abysmally inadequate throne speech on Wednesday. The message: we cannot go back to normal. Normal was a crisis. From our press release, I quote, 5 years ago, this same Prime Minister promised to phase out fossil fuel subsidies. This week, he decided to prolong them. We are tired of Trudeau's broken promises. of other crises. Emissions have risen under the Liberal government, and nothing of the throne speech indicates a shift of trajectory. A year ago, Trudeau committed to planting 2 billion trees. They are nowhere to be seen. This gap between promise and reality is the lens through which young people heard his speech. Moreover, even if his promises were fulfilled, they would remain woefully insufficient. And so we marched and shout and protest because our lives depend on it. The coalition demands a transformation of society and economy to build a more equitable and resilient future. One that invests in people, not corporations. One that dismantles racism and colonialism. And one that treats the crisis like the emergency it is. This includes net zero emissions by 2030, not 2050.
Woo!
For more information on the coalition and the demands, you can go to wearenotgoingback.ca. So we will continue to mobilize until we win real economic, racial, and climate justice. So before I end, I just want to do a chant to make sure everybody in this park knows why we're here. And the chant, guys, kind of a Fridays for Future thing to do chants. So the chant goes like this. What do we want? You respond with climate justice. When do we want it? Now. And we'll repeat that a few times. And if we don't get it, you respond with shut it down. Okay? What do we want?
Climate action!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Climate action!
When do we want it?
Now!
If we don't get it?
Shut it down!
If we don't get it?
Shut it down!
We don't get it!
Shut it down!
Thank you for all coming out today and to continue to make your voices heard because we cannot afford to lose.
As you've been hearing, this is not and cannot be a partisan issue. It has to be something that all of us take as core to our beings, because climate issues are absolutely, we are facing a public health crisis on multiple fronts, and climate is one of them. Race is another. The whole issue of what's happening, the fact that globally people are realizing that Black lives need to matter, and anti-Black racism is a public health issue. Anti-indigeneity is a public health issue. And climate justice and the need for climate justice is a public health issue. And when you start looking at it through that lens, you start seeing connections that mean that it's not that one crisis, COVID, becomes the one that's important. These things are all connected. And we have to ensure that we see public policy through that connected lens. I'm really grateful, personally speaking, for Brad's bike lanes on the Danforth, because it's so much easier, 100%, so much easier for me to get safely downtown and back to Queen's Park, and so I don't have to take other means of transportation. I don't have to drive anymore. It's really made a difference. And I think that when we're trying to solve a series of problems in an interconnected way, we will actually get where we need to go. Sorry, was better? Sorry about that. So we can create an economic recovery that is a green recovery. And we can do this with whomever is in power. And it has to be such. We have to implant this so deeply into the core of every political party, so that people understand that just nobody is going to get elected from the right, from the left, from the center, until they actually commit to taking real action, and we will hold them accountable if they don't. And so, having said that this cannot be a partisan issue, I do want to take a moment to say how terrible the current government is at Queen's Park. The very first thing they did, and they called it like urgent public matters, was to dismantle the climate-related measures that the previous government had in place. So they took apart the cap-and-trade system. They put those stupid stickers up on gas stations. They spent like a lot of your tax dollars to put stupid stickers up on gas stations to counter the federal carbon tax measures. They broke green energy contracts that were in place, none of which were perfect, but they actually dismantled them. How does that make any sense? They took down the charging stations. They've actually paid money to take down charging stations for battery-powered cars. How does this make any sense? They have used the cover of COVID, so they have used the pandemic to push through an anti-environmental and anti-climate agenda, so that developers don't have to do environmental assessments. Like, that's what they pushed through in their Bill 197, which was sort of their economic recovery thing for COVID. They have succeeded in making the process of government less accountable. So they can push things through way faster these days. They can actually push bills through so fast that you guys and other activists don't have time to react to them. Before you know it, it's through and it's done. They cut debate in the House all the time. They choose to not go to committee all the time. It is actually a disaster, and on those grounds alone, they don't deserve to be reelected. So this is not about me, this is about our future together. This cannot be acceptable. We have to get to the point where even the Conservative Party of Canada and of Ontario and of every other province would not dream of not taking climate seriously. That is the work we have to do together. So, thank you so much for having me here today. I will continue to fight very loudly. I will continue to bellow at the top of my lungs. I think Doug Ford doesn't like me very much because I'm a little sharp and I bellow really hard, and I'm okay with that. So I will continue to bellow, and I'm just grateful to belong to a community where so many people, whether you're here today or whether you're elsewhere, but care with every ounce of your fiber and your being. So we will make this happen. We will get this done. As Kendall said, our lives depend upon it. We have no choice. Thank you so much.